Which profession attracts the worst kinds of people?
I'm a casino dealer. People losing money brings out the worst qualities in them, especially when I deal high-limit games. Plus, the pit boss supervisors won't throw a person out who is literally spending thousands. Doesn't matter what they do or say, the casino doesn't want to lose those kinds of patrons. They're catered to. They can be so awful to the dealers. The job has made me look at humanity in a completely different light. Lol. Pro relationship tip. Bring a date to the casino and see how they treat the dealer if they're losing. You'll see what kind of person they really are. I have about 10 years of experience in the industry.
When I was out in Cali, I lived relatively close to Vegas and would go there pretty often to play blackjack and to just be an overall degenerate. Dealers were my favorite part of the night. Even when I often went home broke, the dealers always got a decent cut of my would-be winnings. They often make losing more enjoyable, and I appreciated it when they were like, "Hey man, maybe go get some fresh air and come back. I'll hold your seat." Though, I remember more than one encounter between people who were in absolutely no condition. To be gambling, pull themselves up to the table, lose their ass, and then berate the dealer and talk shit to the whole table. Like, "Sorry you lost because I didn't hit my 17 when the dealer is showing a 6, but that's the game. Let's just ignore how he didn't hit a 15 when the dealer was showing an 8 and how it fucked up the whole table. You get to meet the whole range of people on the $5 tables. $25 and up tables though, man, those dudes get salty."
The executives that run MLMs. They're all bullies and manipulators. The worst kind of people that will tell you that your brother's funeral is a good place to recruit investors.
A good friend of mine is currently in deep. Started as just doing it for the savings, but of course that didn't last long. The sad thing is, she's not that kind of person at all. Nowhere even close. She is religious though, which I've noticed seems to have a correlation with MLMs. A lot of women in MLMs are from religious families' backgrounds. My friend has genuinely been brainwashed. We were so close, I watched her go through the whole process. She was my best friend. We don't talk much now because this thing has kind of taken over her life. But she genuinely believes the lie and is in total denial, and thinks she is doing good for people by recruiting them. I used to try and talk her around. Then it got to the point where I could see I would lose her if I kept bringing it up. I just keep hoping she'll walk away. They are dangerous and damaging. It makes me so sad and angry that I've lost my friend, and that she's losing herself to that bullshit. Sorry for the rant.
I have had a few friends that have become realtors later in life. The ones that stayed with it totally changed who they are. After a few years, they are hardly recognizable as the same people. Vain, shallow, and 100% of the time they are in character and trying to sell.
Had a coworker I really liked a couple years back. Got tired of our shit pay and work hours, so quit and became a realtor. It's so bizarre how it's just become her personality. Her Facebook and Instagram pages are of her in professional attire giving that South Park-style professional smile and stance look. And literally all of her posts are about selling houses. I guess I can't be mad at the hustle, but so weird to just ditch your whole personality like that. I get the feeling that selling a big property is such a rush that those who are good become literally addicted.
Substance abuse mental health professionals seem to fall into one of the following categories. A. Wonderful, angelic, and highly competent souls who truly want to help drug addicts, alcoholics. There may be 20% of the counselors, optimistically. B. Burnt out, incompetent, lazy, don't care types, another 60%. Or C. Absolute personality disordered, narcissistic, Machiavellian, sadistic types who really get off on the enormous power control they have over the lives and fates of the people under their care. Maybe another 20%. The last group can do a lot of damage.
I think it depends on who owns the facility. I've had 2 stints in my life due to major depressive disorder. Around 2010-ish, it was a Catholic church-run hospital. The facility was older and had a lot of lifers mixed in with short-term folks. The staff was primarily older women, no-nonsense types. My second stay was 2018, in a new facility owned by the biggest medical provider in the state. The entire system was more streamlined and professional. The staff was all really great. I never once felt disrespected or anything. In both instances, I will say I was often the only patient not there for substance or alcohol abuse. I was always respectful and polite, and I regularly helped out with the less functional or more seriously gone patients. I always gave respect and always received respect in kind.
I travel to NYC for work fairly often. Most of the time I stay overnight, but this particular day I had 2 major meetings and decided to just fly up and back the same day as it's an easy, non-stop flight from where I live. This detail matters later. I'd been going through a pretty overwhelming few months of work and family life, and had been stress drinking and eating to the point that I thought it would be a good idea to do a detox ahead of these meetings, and especially since I wasn't staying the night and wouldn't need to take clients for dinner or drinks. I'd just cleanse, stick to the detox rules, do my meetings, and fly home. Easy. So, a few days before the trip, I ordered a cleanse from an online retailer. It wasn't something I'd used before, but had lots of positive reviews, seemed effective, and so I bought it. In my haste to get the cleanse rolling quickly, I glossed over 2 important details from the website. 1. The cleanse company said it worked very quickly, convinced my lizard brain this was a positive and not at all risky. And 2. All the reviews that said it worked well, but not ever be far from the toilet. Alas, hindsight. The cleanse arrived, and I begin. The reviews were right. It worked lightning quick and was very effective. The tiny herbal pills I swallowed seemed hell-bent to rid my body of anything and everything that wasn't tied down. I also greatly underestimated the number of times one could visit the toilet in a day and the sheer volume of junk I had packed away in my bloated body. For the first few days, the Code Brown Fairy would visit at all hours, flushing me out and sometimes virulently living up to the claims made on the detox website. But with these 2 meetings looming, I knew I had to find some regularity again, or I was going to have a very bad time. Fortunately, after a few days of my intestines being stormed like Normandy on D-Day, I found a rhythm. No coffee, only the very smallest servings of the various fruits or veg the instructions listed, and planned to be right by a toilet after eating, just in case. This seemed to work, and just in time for my trip. Day of the trip arrives, and because I travel frequently, I was upgraded to business class on my very early morning flight. Even better, I thought, I'll arrive rested and ready to go. But 4 a.m. wake-up calls tend to leave us a little groggy, and I hadn't slept well the night before, nerves for the meetings no less. So when I finally boarded into my first-class seat, I still wasn't fully awake. Flight attendant comes by asking if I wanted coffee, and despite the temptation, the gurgle in my stomach was enough to turn it down and stick with water. Flight takes off, and as we reach altitude, I begin to smell the breakfast. Turns out this flight was just long enough that first-class cabin would be offered a proper meal en route. Having completely deprived myself of everything except water and some fruits, veg, and nuts for days, somehow the ravenous urge to eat won out over the, much wiser, gurgle in my stomach begging me not to. When they came around to take orders, I'd somewhat returned to my senses and only ordered the cold plate, which includes fruits, cheeses, and a bit of bread. Convinced myself it would be fine, and rewarded myself for bravely turning down an omelet by drinking a cup of coffee to wake up and be prepped for the meetings. This, as they say, was the point of no return. After breakfast, all seemed calm, a little too calm. I opened my laptop to get some final meeting prep done, and the rest of the flight was uneventful. Upon landing, however, the internal tempest began anew, and I'd never been more grateful to be first off the plane in my life. So through LaGuardia Airport, I speed-walked, clenching and praying and desperately searching for a bathroom. Found it, stripped with sonic speed, and released. Relief. Gurgle gone. Balance restored. Lesson learned. Play it cool the rest of the day. No more tempting the Code Brown gods. Pulled out my phone to order an Uber into the city and realized 2 colleagues, who were traveling in as well, but had, I thought, missed their flight, were outside the terminal and had already ordered a car. On one hand, I figured my body was empty and no more crises would arise. On the other hand was simply the question, what if I'm wrong? I wish I'd heeded the latter. We piled into the back the taxi, all 3 of us packed together. First part of the drive was uneventful. I was leading the first meeting, so they were asking me questions, talking through scenarios. It felt like a good distraction. Then, as we crossed into Manhattan, the gurgly returned with a vengeance. I've been in some harrowing, life-threatening situations in my day, but pack it into the back of this yellow cab on the verge of unleashing detox diarrhea, I've never been more panicked in my life. For the next 10 trafficked stacked blocks, I'm not even sure if what I said was coherent. All I could do was clench and hold out hope, reminiscent of Gandalf slamming his staff to the rocks and screaming to Durin's Bane, "You shall not pass." After a few final sweaty blocks of sphincter workouts, one of my colleagues says, "Hey, let's just walk from here. It's not that far." Generally, I love walking in New York City, but not when the Aztec two-step is trying to dance straight out of my ass. So, naturally, in my delirium, I quickly said, "That's a great idea. I love walking. Oh God." So we got out, assessed our directions, and set out. Within the first few steps, the stomach cramps subsided a bit, so I allowed myself a brief, yet fateful exhale. Immediately upon exhaling, I felt a fart coming on. As if it bears repeating, never ever trust a fart. And again, much like Gandalf and Durin's Bane, just as the journey continued, the tail of feculence rose up from the deep and struck me down. The fart was coming, and by the time I realized it wasn't a fart, but a flood, it was too late. My clenchers were exhausted and useless, and there, in the middle of Manhattan, I fudged myself. And this one felt like revenge. I stopped on the sidewalk terrified, eyes darting down at the ground to see if my dark slacks showed any signs of excrement, or if I'd begun leaking onto the sidewalk. Momentarily, everything was contained, but I knew I had to find a way out of this quick and with the least fallout possible. But, because I wasn't staying the night, didn't have a hotel or a change of clothes, I had to improvise. My colleagues stopped to ask if everything was okay. I whipped out my phone and said I needed to sort something and for them to go on. Fortunately, they did. I didn't want to make many unnecessary moves as my trousers were doing stunning work of holding back all my runny sins, so I frantically looked around for any open shop that might have a bathroom where I could hide and try to salvage the day, if that were even possible at this point. A work door opened to a hallway next to me, and inside I could see what looked like a rather industrial bathroom. So before the door closes, I took my chance and awkwardly squish-waddled towards it, avoiding eye contact with everyone, and bolted myself inside. With the meeting deadline looming, I got to work. Fortunately, it seemed I'd lucked into a maintenance, housekeeping bathroom. Loads of supplies, soaps, detergents laying around. So I stripped, put my undies and socks in a plastic bag, and tossed them out. Then, half naked, I began to scrub my slacks with all the soap I could find in the big washing sink tub in the bathroom, like I'd never scrubbed before. All the while, making short hops to the toilet do what seemed like an unending stream of every bad decision I'd ever made finally leaving my body. Never had I been more grateful I was wearing dark-colored pants than in that moment. After what seemed like an hour, they smelled mostly soapy, so I wrung out as much water as I could to reassess. With the time I had left and the distance I was from the meeting, I knew I had no other choice than to go and damp, and hope no one noticed it. So, that's what I did. Still not trusting my stomach, and my body still reeling with intestinal trauma, I walked as quickly and carefully as I could, barely arriving in time. Fortunately, this was one of those offices where everyone uses high tables, so we stood around, and I stood a little further away, just in case. We finished the meeting and landed the client. One meeting down, one to go. But this time, I had a little time and space. Bid my colleagues farewell, as the next meeting was just me, ran to a clothing store, found new undies and trousers, threw my heroic slacks in a dumpster, and didn't eat or drink anything for the remainder of the day. All in all, this still keeps me up at night, and I imagine will do for some time.
This happened years ago with myself, a friend, my then-boyfriend, and his daughter. We couldn't do much for toys for this particular Christmas, but our family was nominated for an event called Shop with a Veteran. It's where kids get to go in a Walmart with a veteran and can pick out their own Christmas gifts with a set amount of money donated by civilians and other veterans. The thing is, only the veteran can go in with them. I had later found out it was because some parents had earlier tried to persuade their kids to get things that were more catered to the parents or another child instead of the child who was nominated. I can definitely understand the rule being enforced for this, but some children should have their parents with them. My boyfriend's daughter was diagnosed with severe ADHD and had taken her medication, but she had gotten very excited when she found out about going to get Christmas gifts of her choosing. We found the lady hosting and explained to her about the daughter's ADHD and how she can be a whirlwind when she gets excited and how she doesn't like to listen to people she doesn't know. When we explained to the lady hosting the event that one of us should go in with his daughter just to make sure she behaved, she understood, and talked to the veteran who was going to shop with the daughter. He immediately argued, claiming he was tired of parents wanting to pressure their kids to getting things they didn't want, and he wanted the daughter to have a good time picking out her gift. The lady tried to explain the situation, but the veteran wouldn't hear any of it. I clearly remember him grumbling at us, "I've been to war, I can handle a kid." Well, in that case. After the veteran took the daughter into the store, we saw two friends going in. We didn't know they'd be there, but we were happy to see them. My boyfriend caught up with them and asked one of them if they could keep an eye on the daughter and the veteran. My boyfriend then emphasized that the veteran clearly thought he could handle his daughter, so let him handle her. We waited for about an hour when the veteran returned with the daughter. She was grinning ear to ear at all the presents she was able to get. The veteran looked exhausted and like he had been through hell. He then yelled at us that the daughter was the most disrespectful brat he had ever met, how she had to touch all the toys and threw everything she wanted into the shopping cart, and she was a nightmare when he told her she couldn't have everything she picked out. My boyfriend packed his daughter's gifts in the car and then took her back inside to start our grocery shopping. We couldn't do it while she was in there with the veteran because we had to wait outside for when they were done so we could immediately take her and her gifts. Understandable, they weren't babysitters. I decided to talk to the veteran and told my boyfriend that I'd meet him inside. I asked him if he was okay. He said he was fine, but why didn't we tell him our daughter was crazy? I promptly corrected him by saying Shelby was not crazy. I explained her ADHD to him and how we only wanted to go in with them so she would behave. We know that she knows to behave around us, school, and grandma's house, how she doesn't like to listen to strangers, even if we know them and she doesn't. I apologized and told him that not all parents want to go in to use this as an excuse to get their own gifts. Some genuinely just want to make sure their kids behave. Later in the store, our friend caught up with us and told us everything that happened. The daughter had run up and down the toys aisles. She kept going back and forth from the toys to the cart, throwing in anything she could get her hands on. She even screamed at the veteran when he put some of the toys back. Typical behavior when her normal authority figures aren't watching. When she was satisfied with toys she did get, she kept asking for candy at the checkout, which she asks anyone for when we go to the store. It was amusing to us that a grizzled military veteran was outmatched by a hyperactive 7-year-old. We've since then been better off, and we donate money to this event every year and even toys for any toy drive they have. The veteran still does the event, but he's more understanding when certain children need their parents to go with them. He does get the odd pushy parent now and then, but he handles them rather than flat out denies all parents going in.
So this past Christmas, my missus and I purchased one of our 9-year-old son's Santa gifts from a certain UK sports retail company that also have many stores here in Ireland as well. It was a football rebounder, kinda like a trampoline that you kick the ball at and it bounces back to you. Anyway, we purchased it from their Irish website and thought nothing more of it. A few days go by and we get a notification from a certain brown uniformed courier company that there are customs charges due on something. And as you can imagine, we've bought many things for the kids, so we had to double check what we've ordered and we didn't have anything left that was being imported. So we naturally assumed it was a scam. So I told the wife to call the company and find out who shipped it. And it was a different courier company based in the UK. After a bit of digging and investigating, it turns out that it's our rebounder. They had shipped it from the UK via a local carrier to the brown uniformed guys to deliver to us. Now, my wife and I are both on disability, so an additional charge of almost $50 when you're both already on a fixed income is harsh, especially at Christmas, so I told her to pay it, and I'd deal with the retailer. The first day I called, I had to call 3 times, being stuck on hold for at least 20 minutes each time. But I was patient and polite because I've worked in a call center before, so I knew those people are only doing their job. But I asked to speak to a manager and was promised a call back each time. That never happened. The second day was quite similar. The third day, I was starting to get annoyed, so called back, waiting even longer on hold, and finally wasn't taking this shit any longer. I told the rep that all I wanted was the 50 back because our consumer rights in Ireland dictate that a person must be informed of any additional charges on a purchase, at the very latest by the final checkout screen. And in this case, there was nothing to show that. And I could easily replicate that issue by putting the same item in my basket and going all the way to the checkout screen again, and there was nothing saying we'd have to pay import charges. The rep was indifferent to the situation, but tried to help, and what he said sent me over the edge. He offered me a measly $20 gift voucher to use on their website, but more importantly, he read a statement to me. He said, "We advise our customers that there may be DDU charges, delivery duty unpaid, i.e. customs charges, on any item that gets shipped outside of the UK." Then I asked him where it states this information, and he paused, then said he didn't actually know. I said, "Well, I know one thing. It doesn't say it anywhere on this transaction, because I've checked, and because this is a violation of my consumer rights. I'm going to give your company one last chance to make this right. Have your manager call me within the next 60 minutes, or I'm going to post this entire debacle on LinkedIn and link every senior officer in your company." Then I hung up the phone and waited. Yet again, no call. The next day I went on LinkedIn and followed through on my promise. I created a post detailing what they had done by sticking us with hidden charges and that they were ignoring our requests for a manager and everything they said and did. Then I tagged every senior officer at that company, from the regional managers, through the European directors, all the way to the CEO, and I shammed them for how they operate their company. This, ladies and gentlemen, was now an act of war. Shortly after I posted that, I noticed that they took down the item from their website in an attempt to hide this, but they must have thought in a simpleton that doesn't understand how the internet works. They didn't realize that when you searched for rebounder on their site, that it shows the item in question. So I took a screenshot of that, then another of the item page that was now missing. But then I did a Google cached search for the same page and found a version from 2 days prior happily showing the item. Then I added a comment to my original post highlighting how they were trying to hide it, with the evidence, and trolling them for their heinous behavior, especially at Christmas. Then I tagged and shamed all the senior officers again. And at this point, it was really starting to get some attention. Not only publicly, but 3 people in incognito mode viewed my profile. I wonder who they could have been. So naturally, I took a screenshot of the 3 mysterious visitors listed on my profile and did the same thing. Commented on my own post, highlighting it and trolling them for their incompetence. The next morning, I got a call from a senior exec at their head office in the UK, practically licking my boots with apologies, asking what she can do to make this right. I told her I originally only wanted my $50 back as it wasn't fair, nor even legal, that I had to pay it, but since I had to go to such lengths to get their attention now, I wanted my $50 back, a full refund on my entire purchase, and I wanted to keep the product. That was the only thing that would make this go away. She asked for a couple of hours to fix it, and I said, okay. About an hour later, I got another call from her again, apologizing. She asked for my PayPal address, where she sent the $50. Then she refunded the whole purchase, and she let us keep the product. Obviously, I thanked her for her help, because at that stage I was just happy it was over, but I'll be fudged if I'll let anyone walk all over my family.
The end of this month would be 1 year with the company, so last week I had a check-in as they do with all employees. They had a whole list of questions I answered, and then they asked if I had anything to add. I brought up the value I have with the company and named some positive changes I have made, including one that brought in a large amount of new business over the summer. I make $29 an hour now, and I asked for $32 an hour, and an additional 5 days of PTO. I also offered to come off of their cell phone plan, which they include all employees on, as my husband's job now offers reimbursement for that. I told her I was happy with my job and the company, but there is one thing I wasn't happy with. I was denied 5 days of time off in September because a manager of another department requested the same time off after I did, but they have worked for the company longer, so they were allowed to take it off and I wasn't. I was pretty upset and made it known to my boss because this was already planned for my family, and I put my request in July. I was told they would look into what to do about the policy moving forward in September, and never heard anything back, so I got over it, but figured I'd bring it up again. She didn't give me any kind of feedback after that. Figured either she or my boss would follow up at some point. This morning, I went to use my door card to get in the building, and it didn't work, which was extremely bizarre. I rang the bell and my boss came down and opened the door. He asked me to follow him to his office and he sat down, but before I could sit down, he told me he has to let me go and that it is purely a business decision and nothing I did wrong. I asked if he can clarify what that means, and he said that he was sorry for having to do this, and that is all he can say about the matter, and that my items will be mailed to me because they can't allow me to go back into my office. And then he walked me out. I don't know what to do. I have never been fired before. Ever. My husband doesn't really know what to do either. I know I should file for unemployment, update my resume, start applying for jobs, but I'm pretty overwhelmed right now and feel slightly like things are about to come crashing down on my family. I really believe the reason I was fired was because I brought up this unfair policy twice now, and maybe that they don't want to give me a raise. Firing me over that seems pretty extreme, but there is nothing else I can think of. I thought you usually have to sign something when you get fired, but I didn't and got no other info other than it's a business decision, so I'm left guessing. We have a toddler, a house, car payments, bills like everyone else, and our income just got halved in 5 minutes. We have some savings, but I'm sure not enough. Just looking for some advice to make sure we make the best short-term financial decisions in this crisis until I can get another job, and also, how do I stop crying?
Budget money. Cancel any uncritical services, Netflix, etc. Get into serious budget mode and look at where you might be able to pick up some extra cash, babysitting, yard work, whatever. Your new job is now looking for a new job. Connect with your network of friends, former co-workers, family, let folks know and start meeting with your support network. Take this as an opportunity to reflect on your career, your skills, and strengths. You'll get through this.
Thank you. We are pretty frugal, but I just canceled our Amazon Prime a minute ago as I looked, and we haven't used it more than once or twice a month all year.
I was fired from a job once, and also felt dazed for about a week. They periodically did background checks, and in error, mine had came back with a felony. I was a 22-year-old girl with no record. My boss knew it had to be an error, but HR had to fire me immediately. It took months to get it corrected. I was offered my job back, but at that point I didn't want it. The time away gave me perspective that the job was actually not a good job or good company to work for. I wasn't being paid enough for what I was asked to do. It changed my whole life for the better. I hope something good comes of this for you.
It's more than that. You can work part-time and reduce the amount of unemployment you get weekly. But why in the hell would I do that? You are probably asking yourself. Here is why. Your unemployment is a set total amount that is dispersed until it runs out. If you work part-time, they give you less, but your net gain is higher. The end result is, your unemployment lasts a lot longer because it is being dispersed in lower weekly amounts. You make more money working part-time and collecting partial unemployment. The combined total is more. You still have plenty of time to look for a suitable full-time job. You avoid the associated mental struggles that come from being unemployed. E.g., your ass gets depressed from sitting at home all day. Many years ago, I was in your shoes, and I ended up being on unemployment for almost twice as long as what they calculated I would be. I also made more money than having just unemployment alone. It was a good time in my life because I had a low-stress part-time job but could still squeak by. I used the time to get my head right and set personal priorities and goals. The last thing I would say is to make sure the laws where you live work that way. My advice is good based on my experience, but you probably live someplace else, and my suggestion may not work for you. Anyway, I thought I would just throw that out there for your consideration.
I'm sorry you are going through this. First, Give yourself permission to be upset for a bit. Getting fired is a big, emotional thing. It's totally understandable that you'd cry. Given the circumstances here, it may be worth consulting with an employment lawyer. While nothing here is clearly illegal, a lawyer might notice something I don't. And whenever you aren't given a real reason for being fired, that can be used as leverage. So you might be able to negotiate severance or something similar. Your list of filing for unemployment, updating your resume, and applying for jobs is exactly right. If health insurance was through your employer, you will want to look into either COBRA coverage or getting coverage through healthcare.gov marketplace. But certainly take the long weekend, at a minimum, to relax, gather yourself, and try to get into a better headspace.
A decade ago, I was living in CA and using herbs to combat anxiety, ADHD, and insomnia. My mom called. My father was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He was given 6 months to a year to live. I am close with my parents, and it was pretty devastating news. I took a leave to drive to Florida, where they had retired, to spend some time with them. I drove because I needed my medication and was really nervous about flying with it. My folks also don't approve of herbs or any sweeties, so having my car would give me a place to smoke privately. 3 days of driving later, I arrived. Aunt and uncle, Dad's rich pastor brother, were at the house. They announced they were paying for a Caribbean cruise for the whole family. The cruise was for 10 days and left in 5 days. I panicked. I began to desperately think of an excuse not to go because the thought of dealing with 10 days of no weed terrified me. The problem was that I had to head back home 2 days after the cruise, so my time with Dad would be short. I could not come back out until summer and wouldn't forgive myself if that was too late. That's when I made a plan. This is where I fudged up. I read online that I needed a doctor's note for medications that were controlled substances and to declare them on arrival. I deduced that since I am from a state with legal medical herb, I could bring medicine on board. I am pretty creative with Photoshop, and I had some scans of medical documents, tests, and receipts from my doctor. The issue and my downfall, these were records for my dad, from when they moved out east. We shared the same doctor in CA. We also share the same first and last name, and middle initial, so those I didn't need to change. Shortly, I had altered a treatment plan and a prescription for my dad's gout to a medical herbs document for me. So I thought. The day of the cruise, I convinced my cousins to come an hour early with me to the port so I would not be boarding with my folks. I told them I had a prescription and some medication I didn't want to concern my folks with at this time. They pried. I told them it was for herbs. They gave me high fives. At security, I proudly produced my documents and my professionally packaged herbs. To my surprise, they took both, bagged it, and said it would go to the ship's doctor who would contact me. An hour later, everyone had boarded, and the whole crew of us, 15 or 17 I think, were gathered on deck, all enjoying a drink and some snacks from the buffet while we waited for our rooms and luggage. The doctor and my medication were on my mind. Sure enough, my name is announced to report to medical. Everyone, including my dad, assumed it was for him. Same name. And he gets up to go to medical. All I could think was to tell my mom to relax, and I went with Dad. I hoped the receptionist would clarify it was for me and I would have a private convo with the doctor and get my medicine. I was wrong. Very wrong. The nurse asked for my dad's ID. I identified myself as the son with the same name, but she just asked my dad if he wanted me to go into the office with him to speak to the doctor. Dad said yes. My stomach was in my throat. We waited in the exam room for a couple minutes and the doctor came in and sat down. He looked right at my dad and said, "You're dealing with some very serious medical issues. I just spoke with your doctor, and I am afraid that we are not equipped to deal with possible issues or complications on this ship." He continued that he would have to disembark within an hour and could not go on the cruise. He did go on to explain that he had called the CA doctor as he felt something was not right with the documents I had made. The receptionist asked for the patient number, which I neglected to change, and informed him that all the records had been forwarded to my dad's new doctor in Florida. The ship's doctor then called my dad's current doctor, who said my dad was really sick and had not returned urgent calls regarding his test results. I had never seen my dad so deflated. Doc produced my bag of medication and told me that if I was getting off the ship with my dad, I could pick it up at security when I left. I truly wished it was me who was dying in that moment. All I could say was, "Sorry, this is my fault." And we walked in silence. We went back up and joined the group. Dad took Mom aside for a quick conversation, Then they announced they were getting off the ship and wanted everyone else to enjoy the cruise. Everyone initially wanted to leave with them, but after some tears and hugs, it was decided that everyone would continue on. I opted to leave with my parents. I spent the next 2 weeks of at their home. It was some of the best bonding, healing family time in my life. The story about the herbs came out to all, shock and awe in our religious clan. My folks actually told me I was free to smoke on the deck. They came to find it humorous. My uncle was furious. He came over after the cruise and found me and Dad in the backyard. I had just lit some herbs, and my uncle started in on Dad about family and respect. Dad took the herbs from my hand, took a small puff, looks at my uncle and says, "My doctor said it might help my appetite." My uncle left, but he is not a bad guy, and he did call and apologize the next day. We enjoyed a few more herbs over the next days. I ended up sending Dad a few care packages from Cali, and was able to spend 3 weeks with him in the summer. My dad made it to the following Christmas. Maybe as we approach Christmas, this story surfaced for me. Love you, Dad. Miss you.
I lied to my parents and stole money from them. It got worse over time. It started small, like maybe around when I'm 12 years old. I stole a little bit of money from my parents' drawer, which is the place where they tend to keep their stack of money. My parents were not too tech savvy, so they tend to use cash and kept their money in a small vault or locked drawer. I stole like around $10 and kept it for lunch money. My parents always give me lunch money, but sometimes they forget, and I'm too scared to ask money from my parents. This was due to our financial situation at the time. So every talk regarding money was like walking in landmines. Anyway, so over the years, our financial situation got pretty decent and it was easier to ask for pocket money. So I stopped stealing money until I started college. I attended an overseas university. At first, things were great until I started failing my classes. My grades went from 4.0 GPA to 3.5 and 3.0. And over the semester, it just kept going down. I was struggling to maintain my studies, and I was confused as to why I could not even get the words in. And I started to play mobile games as a way to relieve my stress. The game I'm playing was Genshin Impact. Yes, I know, don't attack me, PLs. Blame my friend for forcing me to play this game with them. At first, it does help with maintaining my stress, but then I began to develop, you guessed it, gacha addiction. For those who are unfamiliar with the term, it is basically gambling. The game has a system where you can get rare, limited characters with great fighting abilities and designs by rolling for them. However, you don't necessarily guarantee to get them every time, hence that's where the gambling comes in. In order for you to get guaranteed to get the character, you have to pay real money. The game doesn't force you to pay money, as long as you kept playing the missions daily, but I began to irresponsibly spend the money my parents send me for my rent and everyday necessities on it. I was addicted to the euphoria of getting the characters and collecting them. It was a distraction tactic to make me forget about my problems. I began to lie to my parents to get them to send more money to me, and even forged various documents and events like, oh, my university was doing a seminar. Can you send me $600 cuss? The entrance fee was expensive cuss. It's a 3-day seminar. Oh, I need to renew my student visa. They need around $5,000 for me to pay for everything. Oh, the document of proof? Here it is. I even resort to forget my bank statements before I email it to them. And it continues on even when I have to return back to my country due to the 2020 event. Every day I stole around 100 more or less depending on how much I can get from their cash drawer. I lost count of how much I've stolen from them. Till this day, they never questioned why I spend so much money. They only told me that all these money is an investment for my future, and it's the parents' responsibility to help their children. Because they thought I spend it on my studies. I was haunted with guilt and began hearing voices screaming how I am such a scornful child, worthless and disgusting. I even contemplate to uninstall my game because I couldn't handle being the person I am. This also contributes even worse to my gaming addiction and ever-failing grades. I couldn't stop and kept stealing. At some point, I did try to stop playing the game, however, my compulsive spending is still there. I ended up using the money on something else, like buying expensive food, buying expensive skincare, purchasing random things on online shopping websites. Yesterday, I downloaded Genshin again and spent even more on it. I finally visited a therapist because my university called me due to my failing grades and advised me to get professional help. However, till this day, I never told my parents about what I did. Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry.
Hey, at least you are realizing, and at least you are coming clean. Now, I would not advise you to tell your parents and break their heart. I would advise you to do the following. Understand that you are in debt with your parents. So say take a conservative number, like say you have stolen 2,000 from them or 5,000 USD, I don't know. Whatever that number is, your head. You have to now concentrate on your studies, on your work, on your future. You have to start making money, and instead of spending it on yourself, you have to slowly pay them back without them knowing what's it for. That's what I would do. I wouldn't uninstall your game because that's the most selfish you could do. It's time you learn to live with yourself and start doing actions that will make you love yourself again. I've been dealing with addictions for a decade, and I have hurt and made dumb decisions that have hurt people around me. The only way out of this is to bring yourself to the present moment. Understand the past, you is dead, and the future, you will never come. What is left is now. Right now, your actions is all that matters.
Honestly, this is the best advice I have ever gotten regarding my issue. I was debating on my next action because I'm just so lost on what to do. Thank you so much for your comment. I will take note of this.